everyone. I would like to introduce all of our Food Farms and Chefs fans to the amazing and talented chef, Franco Lombardo. He is the owner of Sapori and Collingswood. Franco, thank you for joining us on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chef, for joining us.
Thank you.
So I just want to say to all of our listeners out there, I've actually experienced your restaurant. I was introduced to you through my father, who found you. He's been going through all of the different restaurants in that area, and he landed in your restaurant and absolutely fell in love with your food and with you, and as well as his constant companion for eating out, Kelsey. So shout out to both of them for introducing me to you. But why don't you tell our listeners how you got into this and who might have inspired you in your family? Because I know growing up, family is everything. Sitting around the table and eating a delicious meal is one of the biggest, participating things that happen inside, your own family growing up. So is there anybody in your life that inspired you to, delve into becoming a chef?
I think it was always my destiny, and the destiny is a funny way of finding you. I actually went to school for mechanical engineering and then decided it was not my thing, even though I have a very rational, logical, engineer-driven mind. Food was always my passion since I was little. I remember I grew up with a lot of cousins, and obviously my grandmother, Italian, my aunts, everybody would get together for every holiday, and even the weeks before the holidays, we'll get together every month, every night. And they would display different type of recipes, different type of cookies, and I was always hungry. But it wasn't because I was hungry. My mother just said, "I just fed you at home before we came to see Aunt Anna, for example, right?" But it wasn't hungry. It wasn't because I was hungry. I was always interested in tasting some other's dishes prepared by other women. Because I grew up with only women cooked around me. Sorry. So growing up exposed to family cooking, and then growing up in Italy, where you can't help it. You grew up in the land of food, land of pastry, land of bakery. It's all around you. It's not just you're not just exposed to it at home. When you're with your family, you get out of the house, you're exposed to it. The street vendor, the guy who sold the bread, the guy who sold the fish on the corner, the guy who sold the herbs. And they were very loud, and they were part of the very charismatic characters. Actually, they were part of the town. They were like characters that made the town. We had a very Arabic influence in Sicily, so every street vendor yells without a megaphone. But I swear to you, they sound like they have one. But without a megaphone, you can hear from the end of town. One, used to sell basil. One used to sell oregano. Or the guy used to sell fish, meat, and one of my uncles was a street vendor. Actually, he had a little tiny truck, and he would ring the bell, and people from the balcony will fall down the rope with the basket, and that's how the shopping was done. So even when I was out playing with my friends, it was always food, food around me everywhere. So I was always interested in tasting it. And I also grew up in an area where you could just eat off of trees, fruit. We never bought fruit, we never bought vegetables. Everywhere you went, you just picked up. And then I decided to get a job because I've always been a bread lover. So my very first job at age 10 was at a bakery. So I don't know if you remember, I make my own bread. When you came to the restaurant, you tasted the bread?
Yeah, I did. It was very good. It was nice.
That was me.
Yeah, it had that nice crispy
my
crust.
First job. So then I started working for a local restaurant with some very hard-headed chefs. And I don't think most people nowadays would last a day under those circumstances, but I did. Because I was always eager to learn. It tastes good. Now I gotta know how it's made. And then I took classes. Obviously, I went to the Culinary Institute of Palermo, but I didn't get to graduate because I was already doing the mechanical engineering, so I did the courses, what I needed, and then I had the fortune of working with some local restaurant there, where the chefs were actually teachers at the school. Then when I came here, I landed in LA, and I worked for a chef from Florence in Orange County. Well, actually, let me back up. Before that, I moved out of Sicily. I went to Parma outside of Bologna, so I got influenced by that region, which was totally different than what I was used to. And that was an open, it opened my eyes. Like, oh, it's not just the one I know, the one I grew up with. There's more cuisine than, and Italy has a lot of, we have 20 regions. So we have 20 regional cuisine, and within the regions, you have an average of 7 provinces. So then there's a subdivision of 7 provinces where the food changes from region to region, from province to province. So it's like endless. It was fascinating to me. And then when I came to Los Angeles, I started working for this chef from Florence, then moved to Philly, and I started working for a guy from Cinque Terre in the Liguria area, outside of La Spezia, between La Spezia and Genova. And then I decided to open my own. And that's why I embrace many regions. I don't do strictly Sicilian cuisine. I embrace the other regions too.
Yeah, that's actually funny, because that's one of the things that I was going to ask you is, because you grew up in Sicily, because you in Italy and the Mediterranean, I know that you're very in close proximity to other countries and continents. So I was going to ask you, like, did any of that influence your cooking and inspire some of the cuisines that you have in your restaurant? And I know it has, because you use saffron, which is not typically something that I see in in any kind of Sicilian or Italian dish. So
if you do go to Sicily, you will realize that we do have a lot of saffron in Sicily. Sicily was occupied, among other people, by the Arabs for the longest time. So things like saffron, pine nuts, raisins, even our own pastry derives from the Arab occupation. But again, all the Sicilian or so-called self-defined Sicilian cuisine that you find here is not really authentic. And I'm telling you that as a Sicilian, not as a chef, not as a restaurant owner.
Yeah.
Sometimes I bump into restaurants where they say Sicilian cuisine, and I look at the menu, I'm like, there is nothing Sicilian about this. But most people don't know unless you're from there. And then within the island of Sicily, the food differs. If you're on the coast, it's all based on octopus and sardines and locally produced, locally grown vegetables, but mostly fish and seafood. If you go inland in the mountainy area, it's all about boar and rabbits and unpasteurized cheese. There's very little fish available, and so it was always fascinating to me how. And I thought that growing up, I thought that everybody everywhere in the world functioned the same way we did in Sicily. Okay, you here, you eat what grows here. You move to, you drive 10 miles away, the food you eat was grown or produced in the area that you're in. And for the most part, that's how it was growing up. There was nothing came from outside, nothing.
And it's very good that you grew up with that kind of influence too, because it's a lot of the foods that I saw on your menu, all of them were kind of light and airy. They weren't like very heavy, filling for sure, but definitely lighter and heavy influence on the seafood. And I love seafood. So when I got there and I saw your menu, I was like, oh, this is definitely a place for me.
I have a thing or two about seafood. I love seafood.
I love seafood too. And I can't recall if you had octopus on your regular menu, but definitely.
I do now, yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do.
I definitely, the next time that I go there, I have to order something with octopus, or like something with the squid ink pasta. Cuttlefish, yes. So, because I want to also say, like, when I ate there, we ordered a bunch of different dishes, and one of the dishes that we ordered was a meat-based dish. I think it was pork tenderloin or something to that matter. And when you presented it, it was on the bone, but it just fell off. It was like almost like cutting into like butter. It was so soft. That was so delicious and so tasty, but it was it almost tasted like the flavors that you infused it with were simply just the ingredients. You didn't add like a ton of spices. It was just the flavors that, you know, come from like the meats and the fish and whatnot. So how did you come about, you know, creating these dishes and bringing the tasting profiles that you do in your restaurant to the plate?
I believe you're referring to the pork ribs and pork sausage that was braised with porcini, peas, potato, and
Yes.
carrots. That's the one you had there.
Yeah, we shared that.
Yeah, I normally do it with tomato sauce because a lot of people in the area, you know, like the meat that is braised in tomato sauce, and it's tasty, and I love it. But you know, this past few weeks, I've been able to find locally grown peas from Violent, locally grown carrots from Violent as well. So when they're around, I try to make recipe based on what's in season and what grew within few miles from where I am. From now until November, I think I buy everything from most of my vegetables from Vietnam. So I try to use them. You know, I buy 50 to 100 pound case of fresh peas. You have to shell them one by one. People look at me like, you just buy a bag. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And, you know, even if I had to spend 4 hours cleaning it myself, it's relaxing. You know, it relaxes you. It gives you time to think of other recipe or anything. And it's a labor of love. You know, when you cook it, you realize, wow, there is a difference. So having local carrots, local peas, and the pork ribs, I'm like, oh, it's an easy recipe. All I gotta do is not use tomato. I use the peas, I use the carrots, I use the porcini, which I bring from Italy, and it's a classic. Rosemary, very few spices. I don't use a lot of spices because I believe you're supposed to taste the main ingredients of the recipe. It's when you use ingredients that are not too flavorful that you have to do miracles with spices.
Exactly. And, you know, and I tasted it when I was biting into all of the different dishes that, you know, we had ordered. You know, each bite, like if you took the meat individually versus the vegetables or just kind of compiled it together, each bite carried through that profile, which is wonderful, and it's an amazing tasting, you know, experience. And I think that everybody should 100% go visit you because it's an experience worthwhile. And off of that, when people go visit you, you chose Collingswood, New Jersey as, you know, your home to set up your restaurant, and it's extremely popular. And, you know, for every good reason. But how did you come about deciding to, you know, open up a location in Collingswood, and what is the significance of your name?
So you just said that you were able to taste the flavors of individual ingredients. That's why I named the restaurant Sapori. Sapori in Italian is flavors. And that's what you should experience whenever you take a bite of something. You know, I just want to taste the peas. If I'm tasting the peas, I want to taste the carrots, and I really want to taste the carrot. I want to taste the meat, and everything's got to blend together in a perfect harmony of flavors. So that's why I chose Savoy. Collingswood came about because I was living in it. I worked in Philly, in Old City, and I was expecting my first son, and I was trying to buy a house in Philly, which was almost impossible.
Good luck.
So I decided to move outside of the city, and my agent literally was looking, you know, Maniac, all the outskirts of Philadelphia, and I wasn't too crazy about the Northeast Philly or North Philly. So I said, well, why don't we just pick the Ben Franklin and see what's there? And my agent found the location at my house in Collingswood. I had no idea where Collingswood even was. So it was pure fate. I just happened to be there at the right time. I was looking for a location in the Art Museum area, near the old prison, and I couldn't find the right size, the right square footage for the money. And then one day I'm walking down Adon Avenue, and I bump into somebody, and he said there was a location. Even though it wasn't the outskirts of town, there was nothing really going on where I am now. Back in the day, it was just an empty lumber yard, and I was the first restaurant there. And a lot of restaurants, or the 3-4 restaurants that were already existing, were on the other side of Collins Avenue. So when people came from Edmonton and Cherry Hill, they will hit that light, Collins Avenue, and
Mhm.
thought, okay, this is the end of Collingswood. Now it's Camden. So nobody really ventured on the other side. It took a long time. But, that gave me a chance to slowly introduce my food, which people weren't used to it. I did have some people getting up and leave because they didn't see chicken parm in the menu. I once telling me that I wasn't Italian because that was not Italian food. I remember almost wanting to take my passport to work and show them that I was. But it was pure fate. I happened to be there at the right time. Collingswood was going through this marketing campaign, and I think they made an awesome job at that. And it was just, I guess, meant to be.
It was meant to be. Now, I feel like Jean's probably jumping at the bit to like ask you a question. So I'm sure Jean has something for you.
Yes.
Well, Chef, I love listening to your upbringing in Italy. And to me, that passion that you have, one of the things that I constantly go back to, and I have a very good friend of mine who is a owner of a wonderful Italian restaurant up in this way that I go to a lot, and I've spent a lot of time with him, is that, growing up in Italy, in America, I should say, in America, we eat almost like a chore.
Yes.
And in Italy, it's, and in many parts of Europe,
it's pleasure.
It's a pleasure. It's a joy.
It's a pleasure.
We look at the world differently. So if you could give a bit of advice coming from Italy and here to America to our listeners about food, what would that advice be?
What would that advice be? Cooking is not as complicated as people think. There are very easy executable recipe that requires very few ingredients. It can be found at a local store without having to go crazy, looking for them. And by doing that, it opens the book for you to start reading. And once you do, then you find pleasure in cooking and tasting what you can. Then you try to improve yourself. So becoming a little home chef is not that difficult, or even making a simple, healthy meal at home. With inflation, everything going on, going out is expensive. During the pandemic, everybody was forced to stay home. And I think maybe for the most part, during the pandemic, a lot of people started venturing in cooking something. Now we have internet. There are some websites with great recipes that you can execute with no issue, with no knowledge of any techniques. But my advice to the people is, eat when you're not going out to eat. And I do want people obviously to come out and eat because I own a restaurant, but I also think that you can't eat out every night. And those nights that you choose not to, it's okay to venture into something in the kitchen, like cook something from scratch. Don't use a lot of herbs, very few, and start from a simple chicken, for example, and few vegetables found at your local market. Right now in Collingswood, there's an open market on Saturday. You find, lettuces of all kinds, arugula, beets leaves, Tuscan kale, and they're tasty. They're only grown an hour away, so you don't have to do much to it. So at least when you go out, you have a little more of a knowledge now what to expect. And it makes, yeah. But it's not, like you said earlier, it's not considered chores in Italy. It's a pleasure. Eating is a pleasure. I always tell my kids that every bite I take, whenever I eat something, it's a pleasure. I'm not just doing that to satisfy my appetite. And I also eat like I was back home. I eat pasta every day. I don't think I've missed a day in my life without eating pasta. It's just part of my upbringing. You have to have pasta, and it's usually at lunchtime, so you have a whole day to digest those carbs. My kids used to make fun of me, like, "Papa, pasta again?" It's not a matter of making pasta. It's deciding what kind of sauce I'm going to put in that pasta, because it changes every day. But pasta, it's a complete meal. It gives you the carbohydrates and it gives you the vitamins or the protein, whatever you're putting into it, vegetables, or it doesn't have to be ragu all the time. Like, for example, the fava beans for a few weeks ago, the fava beans were in season. So I probably overpaid because everything just too much money. But the flavor, the pleasure of shelving the fava, then taking the skin off, then making, for me, it brings back memory because this is what I grew up with. I used to see my grandmother cleaning the fava beans and my mother, and then cooking it. The kitchen smell like that. So it's like it brings back memories, happy memories, even a smell. So that is a pleasure in each meal. That's why I have a hard time going out sometimes, because without naming any restaurant, the restaurant that you go to that don't really have any taste whatsoever, I'm like, I'm not here just to satisfy my acid producing my stomach. I'm here to find pleasure. My kids will have to tell
I
you
agree.
when we're sitting down and I get something, I put in my mouth, I look at them like, this is the simple pleasure of life. Sip a little wine that goes with it. You taste the vegetables or the meat or the octopus, the sea urchins, whatever I'm cooking, lamb, anything. Like, this is the simple pleasure of life. And it's the way communion was intended to be, I think.
Well, I do think that food is a universal language. It's something we could
Absolutely.
all share and we could all understand, no matter what the type of food is, no matter where you go in the world. Sitting down at the table and breaking bread is communication,
Yes.
and it's an acknowledgement, and it's a it's a sense of family when you do that. When you're invited to break bread with somebody, there's something to be said for that. And here in America, and I would say, just look at the amount of fast food that we have. We do this as this, oh, I got to get something to eat. And in Italy, it's the other way around. We start off thinking about what we're going to have, how are we going to celebrate the day, how are we going.
Do you know what's funny, Gene? Do you know what's funny? Only in Italy I've seen this. You are having lunch. While you're having lunch, you're already thinking and wondering what we're gonna have for dinner. And
right.
Oh yeah, it happens in every house. And now that I lived away from Italy for so long, when I go back, I actually point out to my cousins and my aunts, because we could be like 20 of us eating, and we're all like did an hour or two of preparation. We're finally sitting down, we're eating, and then there's always someone on the group who says "ma," like with the exclamation, as if it's even a question that we're not gonna eat tonight, right? Of course we're gonna eat because we eat 3 times a day, but they emphasize the "ma," which means who knows, what if we don't get to eat tonight? Speaking of eating, while we're eating, what are we gonna prepare for tonight? And I'm like, well, we're still eating lunch. We're going to be sitting down for an hour for a 3-course lunch, and we're already wondering what we're going to have for dinner. That tells you how much passion we have in food.
It's a wonderful thing.
It's
a wonderful thing. I admire that. I right now, the little things. I received an email from a friend of mine who owns an Italian restaurant, and he was just talking about how his zucchini blossoms are coming out. Mm-hmm. So he picked a number, and they're at the restaurant, and they're making stuffed zucchini blossoms and soft shell crabs. And talking about the dinner specials, and that's what life's supposed to be. It's those you wander and you look, and what's fresh and seasonable, and what you can create, and the wonderful things that you can share that are very simple. You use the finest ingredients at the best time, and you get the best food.
I want to pop on.
Zucchini flower just came out. This was the first weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
no, you're fine. I want to pop on because I should also mention, given the 2 men that I'm on the radio with right now, both of you create limoncello and different types of cello from scratch. So Gene actually makes some every year for Christmas and gives them out for holidays. And you make them and have that, kind of like as a secret. I'm kind of ruining the secret, but I feel like it's not on the menu, but if you know, you know. You have different
Well,
cellos.
we can sell it, so we give it complimentary with the dessert.
Yeah.
I think the last time I gave you the red beets cello.
You did. It was so interesting because, and I said it in the actual restaurant. You know, he kind of balanced it really well with the sweetness and the earthiness of the beets, which I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out. But because beets obviously have that very strong earthy, yeah.
Yes.
And whereas, you know, any kind of cello is very sweet and, you know, very easy to drink down, which is why you have it with dessert or as, you know, an after dinner drink, because it also helps you digest. But you definitely balanced it really well, and had, you know, I thought I have to let Jean know that you do this. Because
Well, I bought a case of red beets from my grower in Violin, Kevin, because he always gives me more than I order, and I had all these beets, and there's only so many beets I can use for my menu, and I'm like, they're so good and tasty, and they were grown an hour away from me. It's a shame to make them go bad. So I say, you know what? I made limoncello with beets once, and some people love it, some people didn't care for it. But I decided to make it for those who love beets. And if you love beets, if you like beets, that goes down easily. However, if you don't like beets, it's the worst thing ever.
People don't understand how wonderful the cellos you can make with it. I make a basil cello as well.
Oh yeah, it's good.
I love my basil cello, and I particularly love it drizzled over a little good lemon sorbet.
Yes.
I just think it's a perfect combination, that cold citrus, you know, sorbet with the basil cello. And basil cello is probably the easiest of all cellos to make because it takes about a week, and you know, it doesn't take long, and it's very,
I'm gonna share with you even a simple, easier one. If you can actually find fresh bay leaf, try to make it with that. But they have to be fresh bay leaf. They have to be fresh though, not the dry ones that we find here.
No. I have a bay laurel tree. I have a bay laurel bush. So.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I'll buy a Ziploc bag of bay leaf from you if you have a lot.
Chef, I'll come over and bring you a bag. It would be my pleasure.
And then I'll give you my recipe, which is very simple. But that is one of the most delicious cello I've ever made and tasted. It's a beautiful color. It's a beautiful green color, and it tastes amazing. And bay leaf also settles your stomach. Growing up, whenever we had a stomach ache, we had a lot, our grandmother made us tea with bay leaf, or sometimes with the flower of the cactus pear.
We have about we have a tight 2 minutes left, and then we have to round you up. But Jean, do you have another question for Franco?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, so Franco, what specials are you running right now for the 4th of July and throughout the week? And then where can our listeners find you?
So right now I'm using, as I said, a lot of produce and vegetables from Violin. So I started doing the zucchini flowers. Last week I did them with anchovies and mozzarella. This week I'm doing it with smoked mozzarella and prosciutto. And then I do a batter with durum flour and eggs. I bought locally grown peas, locally grown carrots. So I'm doing like a summer pasta soup dish where I break down the linguine and I cook the linguine with the peas and the chickpeas and the fava beans all together. So as it cooks, the starch gets released into it. That's an advice that I give everybody. Whenever you cook any legumes, beans, lentils, don't cook the pasta separately. Cook it in it with it. When the lentils and the legumes are ready, that's we cook pasta. Nice.
Now, where can we find you online? And obviously, we find you in Collingswood, New Jersey.
Collingswood, yes. You find us on Facebook, Sapori, Trattoria, Italiano, Collingswood. I always emphasize to put down Collingswood. There's a lot of Saporis in the United States, so we might find the wrong one. But Sapori in Collingswood. Facebook, obviously Instagram, and then the website is sapori.info. I'm also doing a monkfish caponata this week with Sicilian eggplant, locally grown and violent. They're phenomenal. You don't have to soak them. They're not bitter. There's not a lot of seeds. And the monkfish, which I love, it's a great texture fish, goes well with eggplant. Absolutely. I'm doing that. I went to the food shows and last week in New York, 2 weeks ago, and I got this smoked burratina that is phenomenal. So I'm doing that. And I'm doing a bruschetta with avocado, smoked salmon, and lemon, and a seafood salad, a classical seafood salad with octopus, shrimp, crabs, calamari, celery, olives, lemon vinaigrette. Simple, refreshing.
Well, that sounds delicious, and I look forward to joining your or visiting you again, I should say, and hopefully Gene can join me. But thank you so much for joining us on Food Friends and Chefs.
Thank you, Chef.
Absolutely. I would like to a few days in advance notice because I want to make you and Gene a fregola sarda pasta with sepia.
Okay, nice.
We will set it up, and I will bring you a bag of fresh bay leaf.
And I will owe you for life. And I will make the limoncello and share it with you.
All right.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Thank you.